Live to Sydney now. Shadow Education Minister Tanya Plibersek joins me now. Thanks so much for your time. We just saw not only Melbourne Cup yesterday, but the RBA leaving rates on hold. What does that tell you about the state of our economy?
Well, I think historic low rates tell you that the economy is in trouble, and we've got a government that is trying to pretend it's otherwise. They're telling families that they've never had it better. So, of course, a lowering of interest rates yesterday would have signalled a worsening economy. I think the fact that we're bumping along the bottom is no cause for comfort. Families will tell you that they're really struggling because they haven't seen a wage increase in years. That means they're not, buying a coffee on the way to work or taking the kids out for pizza on a Friday night. They're not creating jobs for other people. We'll see Christmas spending in the next few months. I think retailers are really hanging out, hoping that there'll be an increase in Christmas spending. But there's very low confidence amongst consumers at the moment, and very low confidence from business. We've seen very low business investment as well. The economy is very much under pressure. The interest rate cuts have not had enough effect on our economy. Of course, unless wages start to increase, that problem will continue.
Has the government's $7 billion worth of tax cuts worked enough to warrant fast-tracking a second tranche?
Well, look, I don't think you can argue that the tax cuts to date have had the effect that we hoped they would have on the economy. I think it's very important that the government gives consideration to bringing forward the second tranche of tax cuts. People need more money in their pockets to spend.
But why would you double down on something that hasn't proven to have worked?
Well, look, our preference, of course, is to see wages increase. We know that penalty rate cuts, we know that unemployment and underemployment. We've got almost 2 million Australians who are unemployed or underemployed, want more hours at work. This is having an effect on the broader economy. We would like to see penalty rates restored. We'd like to see some of those industries where people are clearly underpaid, like childcare, like aged care, have a plan to better paid, more secure work in those industries. But bringing forward tax cuts, bringing forward infrastructure spending, looking at responsible stimulus, all of that should be on the table for the government, because it can't keep sticking its head in the sand pretending that Australians have never had it better. We have seriously low growth at the moment. It's a real problem for the broader economy, and families are feeling it. They're feeling it every day.
But looking at the $7 billion in income tax cuts that we've just seen, it's had a very marginal stimulatory effect on the economy. So I'm just wondering why you'd double down on something in terms of Labor calling for the second tranche to be fast-tracked when it hasn't worked really to date.
Well, because people need more money in their pockets, and the fact that the government doesn't have a plan to lift wages means that we have to look at other measures that are on the table. But one of the greatest problems in the economy today is that people don't have the confidence to spend because they don't know whether they'll have a job next week. They don't know when their next pay cut's coming. They don't know when they'll get the extra hours they're depending on to make ends meet. That's a serious issue, and I mean, tax cuts are one way of dealing with that. We would absolutely like to see increased wages as another way of dealing with this.
Labor's election review is due out this week on Thursday. Do you expect it to go to this state of the economy now and perhaps look at Labor's promised spending at the last election and analyse whether it's right for these times?
Look, I'm not sure what will be in the review on Thursday. Of course, I'll read it with interest. It's important that we learn from our mistakes. But I also think that people are a bit over listening to the Labor Party talk about itself and do its therapy in public. I think what we need to do is focus on the things that make a difference in people's lives. And that means decent jobs with good pay, secure conditions. It means health and education systems that meet people's needs. We've got, for example, a tradie shortage across Australia. We've got hospital waiting times blowing out. I have people stopping me in the street asking me when their child's school's going to get an upgrade, whether their son or daughter can get an apprenticeship. I don't have them stopping me in the street asking me how's the Labor Party review going. We need to be very clear that our concerns are the concerns of the Australian people, making sure that they've got a good quality of life, the quality of life that they deserve.
And has there been too much focus on progressive issues?
Do you know what? I think it's incredible that the biggest, the Liberal Party is out there saying that they won an election with this clear vision for the country. The one thing you could absolutely not say is that the Liberal Party was laying out a clear vision for Australia before the election. Their biggest weapon was a scare campaign about a death tax that Labor doesn't have. It was never Labor policy. So I don't think this kind of Labor navel gazing solves the problem that we had a lying campaign.
But it was a
against
suggestion
us,
from your own side, from Claire O'Neill, who says, and Jim Chalmers, who says people in the outer suburbs perhaps felt a little isolated by some of the social issues that seem to swamp your message. Do you agree with that?
I think the most important thing for ordinary people, ordinary families, is having a job, having a secure job, getting decently paid for that, and having the services that government ought to supply to Australian citizens working properly. Our fantastic world-class health system has seen more and more Australians waiting longer for surgery, waiting longer in emergency, reaching into their pockets for higher out-of-pocket expenses. In education, we've seen public schools missing out on funding increases. We've seen them with rundown facilities, TAFEs around Australia closing, young people being denied an apprenticeship, 150,000 fewer apprentices and trainees today than when the Liberals came to office, cutting of funding for university places and research. And these are, honestly, the things that people raise with me are what's the government doing to make my life better? And more importantly, what's the government doing to make sure we leave a better country for our kids? That we, of course, address issues like climate change, because it's about leaving a better country for our kids. All of the other minutiae that we will look through in this report, that's important for us to learn from, but it's not the top concern of the people that I talk to every day.
Just very quickly, an AG report yesterday that was tabled just after Melbourne Cup found that a $220 million government scheme gave money to projects that were ineligible.
Wow, isn't it amazing that you would release a report like that when everybody's obsessing over the Melbourne Cup? I mean, this is a shocking report that shows that money was directed to projects that were not recommended by the responsible department, that ministers interfered in the selection of projects that weren't recommended to be funded and projects that were recommended not to be funded, that there was obvious political bias and poor administration in this report. And how cynical is it that we've got a government that thinks that they can slip it out in the shadow of the Melbourne Cup and nobody will notice? It's so dodgy.
Tanya Plibersek, thank you.
Thank you, Laura.